Hi, I'm going to show you how to make one of these surgical face masks. There are a lot of variations that you can, or that someone who owns this mask can put on it to make it fit better. This one in particular has a little cutout so that you can slip in an air filter. The air filter that I'm using is this brand and the 2500 series because it says that it has good, better, best for all of these types of air particles, and virus is here and it's in the better category. And a friend of mine who is an ER doctor has asked for those filters to be put in the mask, and I'm finding them to still make, the mask is still breathable even with that filter. I'm using these Lycra bands that someone gave me. Any kind of elastic, sewing elastic probably will do. It will have to stand up to washing. And if this loop is too big, I have a very small face. I find this to be pretty loose on me, but I think it's good to sew them like this because someone with a bigger face or a smaller face, bigger, this is gonna work, but for smaller, you can just cut this loop and then tie it to the tightness that works for you. Okay, so other types of elastic that I have used, I made this mask and this was 1/2 inch like sewing elastic that goes in like waistbands. I wanted to make it 1/4 inch so I could use more of it, so I cut it in half, but I don't think that's a good idea because it is starting to fray. Other elastic that you can use, I'm using bias tape, I think would be fine. Yeah, anything you can find. Okay, so I have cut a piece of fabric that is 18 inches long and 7.5 inches wide, and I then stitched the long seams closed to finish them. Some people are saying it's better to have 2 different fabrics, one in the back and one in the front, so that people know which side goes on their face and which side goes outward. I find this easier for me, so I just took a fabric marker and wrote back on the side that's going to be the back. But if you want to use 2 different fabrics to indicate that, you would just cut, this in half, and one fabric would be of that type and this side would be the other type of fabric. So that would be 9 inches each and still 7.5. And the 7.5 is just to account for this like seam allowance. Okay, so now I folded my piece of fabric in half with the right sides together, and I have measured and marked this whole piece is about 8.25 inches. So I just measured approximately 2-inch gap in the middle on the bottom and the top. And I just used Crayola washable marker that my kids use because it should wash out in the wash, and if it doesn't, who cares? Now I'm going to start sewing from one of my marks, and I'm going to sew to about, not very far because I need to leave myself enough room to insert the elastic. So I'm giving myself a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that's just to the end of the presser foot. There's probably good. I learned the hard way that if you get too close to the end, it makes it very hard to insert the elastic. And just pulling the elastic to the end here. Then I'm going to back stitch over the elastic a couple times to make sure that it's really secure. gonna drop my needle, lift the presser foot, turn it, and then drop my presser foot, so then I'm back at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Going to just push that elastic out of the way to make sure I don't accidentally sew over it. And then I'm gonna go down to the next corner, and again, I'm gonna stop around here. Okay, now I'm going to take that elastic from the other corner and I'm going to put it into this corner. And I'm gonna sew down. Oh, did back stitch too early? Okay, I'm gonna back stitch over it a couple times. Okay, I'm gonna turn. Oh, need to go down one more turn of the needle. Okay, now I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna stop at this mark right here. And I'm gonna back stitch when I get there. Okay. Okay, I'm picking up after that gap. I started at my second mark and I'm just gonna go a little bit down because I need to add my next elastic. So I'm gonna stop right about there. I'm gonna take another piece of elastic, put it in here. I'm not using pins, but you know, you're totally free if it helps you to use pins. Same thing, back stitch over the elastic a couple times to really secure it. Okay, and drop your needle. Oh, looks like I need to do it one more time. Okay. Maybe even one more time. Okay, and make sure again to get your elastic out of the way. Line these up again and sew down until I'm about here. Okay, now I'm grabbing the elastic that I had just sewn into the corner and I'm pulling it down to secure it into this corner. Okay, now I'm gonna sew down to this gap. Okay, so I finished sewing to the gap, and of course I back stitched right when I got to each gap. Now you're gonna flip this inside out. Now for some reason, I thought I left enough, and maybe I did, but they are pretty small gaps, so, well, I guess it turns out pretty easily with those 2 inches. So I'm turning them now right side out, pressing into the corners of my finger to really get that out, pressing the seams open with my fingers on both sides. Okay, this is going to be the mask. Now, I am going to cut a piece of little bendable wire that I just had lying around the house to use as the nose piece. So, let's see, I'm gonna straighten this out a little bit. This was just like in a craft kit for my kids. I think I'll do it to here. So that's like what, 3 inches? Let's see. Yep, just about 3 inches. Now I'm going to go to what will be the top of my mask, and I'm going to put this little piece of wire in here. And I'm going to push it all the way up to the top, and I'm going to hold on to it so it doesn't get lost, although if it does get lost, it's not a big deal. And now I am going to secure it into place. So here's the end of it, right where my fingernail is. I'm going to sew right there. Now I'm moving my finger back, but holding on to the piece. Just gonna pull my threads out. Ah, okay. Okay, I'm gonna slow that down. Drop my needle. I'm gonna turn it so I can sew down to the end of the piece, which is right about here. So I'm going to hold it. Again, feel free to use pins. Okay, now I'm going to pick up the piece a little. Okay, end of the piece is right here, so I have to go a little further. Okay. Okay, it's not pretty, but that's not what these are about. It's about being fast and making something that works. Now I'm going to add the pleats. Since this is the back of the mask, I'm going to make the pleats on the front. So I'm just going to take a little bit of fabric and fold it over. The first one's always the easiest. I'm going to pin it. Okay, so I pinned 2 more pleats just like I pinned the first, and now I'm going to sew them into place. And I'm just going to finagle that under there. Back stitch to lock in my stitches. Pull out my pins as I go. Then I'm just going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Also, I'm going in the direction that the pleats are laying because it's easier for the sewing machine to get over them. So when you do the other side, it's a little bit more tricky, but not really. Okay, so for the other side, I've just done the same thing, but I've put the mask inside so that I can still sew in the direction of the pleats. Same seam allowance, more or less. If this makes you feel uncomfortable or that you find this too hard, just... Okay, so I finished sewing the pleats. I had to, my husband had to stop videotaping me because my 7-year-old fell. But as you can see, I now have a nice mask. This one fits me a lot better. It's smaller, so I think that if you are making them for someone bigger or for adult men, you may want to make it a little bit longer. This is, again, this was 18 inches, so you might extend it. a little bit. Yeah, now I'm going to show you how to put in the filter. So this is, I cut out a piece of that filter by, I just made it a little, I measured the mask and made it a little bit smaller than the dimensions of the finished mask. The opening at the bottom is where the filter is going to go. Unfortunately, I think I made it a little too small, so I would leave maybe more like a 3-inch gap. It's not, although I guess getting it in is not that hard. What's harder is spreading it out and getting it to lie flat. It just takes a lot of maneuvering. But once you do, you know, this should be a mask that can be washed. And the filter, if you buy one of those packets, it's $25 and it comes with a lot of material. It can be used to make a lot of, you know, individual masks with one filter, or you could cut a lot of filter pieces out of it. Getting the filter out of that container though is actually pretty time consuming. Took me like maybe, it was the most time consuming thing I did. Basically, there's this metal grating that's kind of like adhered to the filter. And what you have to do is you have to take a pair of scissors that you don't care about, and clip the little wires. And you really do have to do this side, and this side. Then you can peel it off. This thing, unfortunately, is stuck on there pretty solidly, so you kind of have to tear that off. I was able to do it without tearing the filter, but I won't use that part of the filter in a mask. Then you have to do the same thing on the other side. Clip, 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 peel. Then I would take fabric scissors that are sharper and cut out the filter. And that's it.